One of the best things about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is how all these different projects across movies, TV and one-shot short films speak to each other. A throwaway line in an older flick might take on a whole new meaning 5 years down the line, like the Winter Soldier's "On Your Left" creating an emotional punch in Endgame's portal scene. And it's this type of deep connective tissue that makes the MCU feel rewarding for those who keep up with it. Whether these moments simply have more depth than is apparent on the surface, or whether they have bigger implications for the wider MCU that you didn't even think about, there's more going on in Marvel's big screen universe than first meets the eye. And to borrow an analogy from a certain ogre, some scenes have hidden onion-like layers of importance that even hardcore fans could easily miss. I am Marcus Bronzy, and let's kick off 10 MCU moments more important than you realised. Number 10. Proxima Midnight's relationship with CORVUS GLAIVE. Avengers Endgame. The members of Thanos' Black Order weren't fleshed out very much during Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, with their backstories being removed from early drafts of the Infinity War script due to the movie being too crowded. Still, there are various moments throughout both movies where we can glean more information about their personalities, histories, and relationships, like this one shot in Endgame where, if you look closely, Proxima Midnight and CORVUS GLAIVE hold each other shortly after Tony's snap when Thanos and his forces are disintegrating. This is an easy to miss detail that you might simply assume is a display of friendship as the two face their deaths, but it's actually much more than that. As confirmed by Endgame director Joe Russo, Proxima and CORVUS are in fact married in the MCU, a detail lifted straight from the comic books and one that was supposed to be shown in that aforementioned cut backstory, making this a tragic moment for the two lovers sharing one final embrace. Number 9. KLEIN'S display of courage earns him Fury's trust. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. The MCU sometimes brings back minor side characters years after we last saw them, like the "I'm not Tony Stark" guy from Iron Man returning in Spider-Man: Far From Home. And though many people realised it, the franchise did something similar with a small moment in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Towards the end of Cap's second solo outing, there's a scene where Hydra agent Brock Rumlow holds a SHIELD technician at gunpoint, forcing him to launch the Project Insight helicarriers. This technician bravely refuses and a scuffle quickly breaks out, and though the helicarriers are ultimately launched by Rumlow himself, this random SHIELD member's courageous display is later rewarded when Nick Fury recruits him to his inner circle. The technician's name is Cameron Kline, and in a moment that a good deal of viewers probably didn't register, he returns in Avengers: Age of Ultron, assisting Fury and Maria Hill in rescuing the citizens of Sokovia. Number 8. The touching story behind DRAX'S tattoos. Guardians of the Galaxy. Another thing the MCU does very well is attention to detail. A perfect example of this are the many tattoos emblazoned across Drax's body, which could have easily been nothing more than random, unexplained markings, but are actually way more important than any of us first realised. As revealed by Guardians of the Galaxy writer-director James Gunn, Drax's ink is the story of his life, with each tattoo symbolising a different memory about his family, the birth of his daughter, his mother and father in his childhood, and his marriage to his wife, to name but a few. In a deleted scene, Drax actually describes these meanings to Rocket, and when you consider that his family was tragically murdered before the events of the first film, it's like Drax is literally being consumed by his grief, adding so much more depth to a character who is so often used just for comedic relief. Number 7. Tony and Steve prove each other wrong. The Avengers. Though they did come to respect each other over time, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers rarely saw eye to eye, throwing insults and punches at each other whenever they got the chance. One of their most famous bickering moments occurs during the first Avengers movie, where a heated debate results in Steve telling Tony, "You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play," and Tony retorting, "Everything special about you came out of a bottle." We couldn't possibly have known this at the time, and even in hindsight it's easy to miss, but this moment works as a setup for each character's long-term story arc, hinting at where they'd ultimately end up in Avengers Endgame. Tony ends up sacrificing himself to save the universe, proving Steve's earlier comment wrong, while Steve shows that he's a kind, heroic and worthy soul by lifting Mjolnir. This clearly demonstrates that not everything special about him came out of a bottle. Number 6. The museum voice is a real-life military advocate. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. The Smithsonian scenes in Captain America: The Winter Soldier feature a museum narrator who tells guests about the history of Steve Rogers, Bucky Barnes, and the Howling Commandos. Though you probably don't think twice about this voice whilst watching the movie, this is another one of those things that Marvel Studios went above and beyond with, putting in way more care than they needed to. Rather than just roping in any old voice actor, the studio went out of its way to hire Hollywood icon Gary Sinise, who you'll know from his roles in The Stand, Of Mice and Men, Apollo 13, and of course, Forrest Gump. Sinise is a major advocate for America's servicemen and women and has created a foundation in 2011 dedicated to helping wounded military veterans. As such, his role in The Winter Soldier wasn't just a cool way for Marvel Studios to honour the bravery of Captain America and his allies, but was also a tip of the hat to real-life soldiers who served in the armed forces. Number 5. Tony saves Yinsen's townspeople. Iron Men. Considering Tony's ultimate sacrifice in Avengers Endgame, Yinsen, the man who implored the self-absorbed billionaire to not waste his life, setting him on a more heroic path, is one of the most important characters in the MCU. Tony doesn't waste any time in heading down the heroic path either, strapping on his new and improved Iron Man suit midway through the original movie and using it to free the citizens of a small town from the Ten Rings' callous grip. But it gets deeper. The town that Tony liberates is actually the same town that Yinsen is from, a connection that isn't obvious unless you're paying close attention when Yinsen mentions its name, Gulmira, during a cave scene early in the movie, and again when Tony hears it whilst watching a news report. This means that Tony isn't just helping these townspeople because the Ten Rings are stationed there with Stark weaponry, he's also helping them so he can honour the fallen friend who saved and changed his life. Number 4. The remaining Avengers represent the 5 stages of grief, Avengers Endgame. After Natasha Romanoff's sacrifice in Avengers Endgame, the 5 remaining OG Avengers gather by the lake outside the Avengers HQ, taking a moment to mourn. They all react to her death in slightly different ways, and though you perhaps didn't notice this at first, each of their responses seem tailored to match the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Thor is clearly in denial, refusing to accept that Natasha is dead, and telling his allies that they can use the Infinity Stones to bring her back. Hulk fittingly displays a lot of anger, picking up a bench and tossing it into the distance. Then there's Clint, who represents the bargaining phase by saying, "It was supposed to be me," who sacrificed themselves, and Steve, whose silent sadness is representative of depression. Finally, we have Tony Stark, who seems the most calm and collected of the bunch, whose line, "Do we know if she had any family?" indicates that he's accepted Nat's death. The brilliant thing about this is that each of these reactions doesn't feel forced, they actually feel in character, giving this moment an added layer of subtext which shows these godlike heroes reacting to their loss in a very relatable human way. Number 3. ASGARD'S extensive MCU history. Thor. After Asgard's destruction, the surviving Asgardians relocate to a small village on the coast of Norway, dubbing it New Asgard. The New Asgard iteration of this village, also known by its original name, Donspike, was first seen in Avengers Endgame, but what isn't readily apparent is that this unassuming remote locale is something of a converging point for several centuries of the MCU history, and this is far from the first time it's popped up in the franchise. Rather, Donspike's importance stretches all the way back to the first Thor movie, where an opening scene shows that it was invaded by the Frost Giants in 965 AD, forcing Odin and his Asgardian army to intervene. From here, Odin left the Tesseract on Earth for some reason, and the device was hidden deep within Donspike, where it remained safe for hundreds of years. That is until Donspike showed up once again in Captain America, the first Avenger, where the Red Skull ravaged the village in 1942 and located the Tesseract hidden within a church. Basically, this place is low-key one of the most crucial places in the MCU, and not just in the Prime Universe either, with the village also appearing in the What If's Captain Carter episode. So don't be surprised if many more important events take place here as the franchise continues. Number 2. Red Skull prophesizes the Flag Smashers, Captain America, the First Avenger. Speaking of Red Skull and Captain America, the First Avenger, that movie contains a small moment that doesn't just foreshadow Cap's future, but the future of the entire MCU as we know it. During the final battle between the two characters, just before Red Skull is teleported by the Tesseract, the red-headed villain hits Cap with the following line: "You could have the power of the gods, yet you wear a flag on your chest and think you fight a battle of nations. I have seen the future. Captain, there are no flags." Cap retorts with a "not in my future," But as it would turn out, Red Skull was totally right. Not only do the stars and stripes disappear from Cap's outfits as he becomes more and more disillusioned with the modern world, but the damaged society we see post-Endgame gives way to a group called the Flag Smashers, whose mission statement is to strip away borders and create a more united world. Now, obviously both Red Skull and Marvel Studios couldn't have known that the Flag Smashers would have one day featured in the MCU, but in hindsight, Red Skull seemingly foreshadowed this widespread anti-nationalist movement with a single line of dialogue and over 70 years in advance. Number 1. The Illuminati has been here all along. Iron Man 2. With the MCU set to introduce the Illuminati in the upcoming Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, there's a ton of speculation about who might be on the team, with predictions ranging from Captain Carter to Black Bolt to Reed Richards. But if this moment in Iron Man 2 is more than just a fun Easter egg, then Marvel Studios might have confirmed a future Illuminati member. During the court sequence in Iron Man 2, Tony Stark pulls out his ridiculously advanced smartphone and uses it to hack the TV screens in the courtroom, and in a blink and you'll miss it shot of his home screen, we can see an app called Illuminati in the right hand corner. Without having a zoom and enhance in your own eyeballs, it's virtually impossible to notice this detail, but given what we know about Doctor Strange 2, the implications of it could be huge. Again, it could have just been a fun Easter egg, but what if it wasn't? What if Marvel Studios was thinking about the Illuminati all the way back in 2010 and Stark is going to be one of those people sat at the table in Doctor Strange 2? The filmmakers could even retroactively say that this app was a clue, even if it wasn't their intent at the time. The buzz on opening night would be insane if Robert Downey Jr. makes a triumphant return, and this throwaway moment could have been sowing those seeds from the very beginning of this franchise. Spicy! What did we miss? Let us know in the comments below, and of course don't forget to give us a like and subscribe here, and check us out on social media at What's Culture. I too am there on all the socials at MarcusBronzy, Marcus Bronzy. Also twitch.tv/Marcus Bronzy, and my podcast called Ain't Got a Clue is there wherever you listen to yours. Until next time, peace.